Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, Good Yontif. Pick one. Two yeshiva boys, taking a hike along a country road, waved a large sign that they had made at each car that passed them by. It said, "The end is near. Turn yourself around now before it is too late." One driver didn't appreciate the religious tone of the sign, and as he passed the boys, shouted out the window, "Fanatics," accompanied by, let's just say, a rude gesture, and drove off. A moment later, the boys heard the screech of brakes and the sound of a car falling into the river. They looked at each other and said, "Do you think we should just put up a sign that says bridge out?" On this Rosh Hashanah, we take some time to examine the signs and the bridges and the roads we are traveling. Which signs have we ignored? Which bridges are broken ahead? Will we understand the signs when we see them? Will a sign present us with a wake-up call, a near miss, or will we plunge off the bridge into the deep? Several weeks ago, one of our temple members, who will remain nameless to protect the guilty but is here this morning, stopped by my office to chat. When she saw the choir binders and the Holy Days papers all over my desk, she said to me, "Didn't we do this last year?" I'm pretty sure she was joking. Every year, we take stock not only of ourselves personally, but also what we've seen of this community and of the world. And we hold up signs, words that point to crumbling bridges and dirt roads that end in the middle of nowhere. What does my sign say this year, we ask ourselves? Where do I feel most keenly the pain of my community? Where do I feel the places we've gotten lost along the way? This year, I want to hold up a sign that simply says, "This world is not broken." Subtitle, "You are not broken." Some people have to work hard to focus on the beauty around us, but others seem to be naturally living as though they can just focus on the good. One such person passed away this year, and his name was Jimmy Buffett. Like many of you, I was devastated to hear of his death. I got to see him in concert a couple of times, and I do not think I've ever been to happier concerts. His music has been the soundtrack of family vacations and road trips for my kids' entire lives. But it isn't just the casual, down-to-earth, at-ease sound of his music, or even the lyrics that tell the narrative of regular lives. As one writer put it, you know how some folks say you should never meet your heroes? Well, Jimmy wasn't my hero until after we met. That guy saw the world with delight. Abraham Joshua Heschel described this way of living as radical amazement. And Jimmy Buffett got it right. The pure joy in his laughter when he saw a dolphin do a spectacular headstand. The look on his face walking barefoot along the ocean. The all-in attitude, surfing through a hurricane. I don't know if I've lived most of my life like Jimmy Buffett, but I sure want to live the rest of it that way. He's one of my signs, a sign that says, "Put on some rose-colored Maui Jims and take a different kind of a look at this world." Perhaps you remember the story of Steven Sotloff, an American-Israeli journalist who in 2013 was captured in Syria by ISIS. Our hearts broke in anguish as he was brutally executed. Later, a letter he wrote to his family was discovered. It was smuggled out by a former cellmate of his who did survive, and in it he wrote one of the most powerful lines. He told his family, live your life to the fullest. Everyone has two lives. The second one begins when you realize that you have only one. You don't have to look far to see stories of tragedy and loss. You don't have to look far to find things to fear. The world is tumultuous, it is unfair, it is dangerous, and it is scary. It is also full of decency, kindness, joy. It is also full of miracles. A friend relayed this story to me recently. Leaving a store, I returned to my car only to find I'd locked my keys and cell phone inside. A teenager riding his bike saw me kick my tire and say a few choice words. "What's wrong?" he asked. I explained the situation. "And even if I could call my husband, he can't bring me the car key because this is our only car." He handed me his cell phone. "Call your husband and tell him I'm coming to get his key." "That's 7 miles round trip," I said. "Don't worry about it," he said. An hour later, he returned with my key. I offered him some money, but he refused. "Let's just say I needed the exercise," he said. And then, like a cowboy in the movies, he just rode off into the sunset. Another story from another friend. When I was 7, my family drove to the Grand Canyon. At one point, my favorite blanket flew out the window and it was gone. I was inconsolable. Soon after, we stopped at a gas station. I sat on a bench moping, tears streaming down my face, and I was about to attempt to eat my sandwich when a biker gang pulled into the station. A huge, frightening man with a gray and black beard approached and asked, "Is that your blue Ford?" My wide-eyed mother nodded hesitantly. And then from out of his jacket pocket, the man pulled my blanket, handed it to my mother, and walked away back to his motorcycle. My mother stood with her mouth wide open while I repaid him the only way I knew. I ran to him and I handed him my sandwich. There is surely evidence of anguish everywhere, but there is also evidence of beauty. We read next week on Yom Kippur, "I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse." Choose life. Choosing life means witnessing all the life-giving moments. The Talmud teaches us that entrances to holiness are everywhere and all the time. We can choose to see life even in the face of death. Pirkei Avot tells us that Abraham, of whom we just read, faces 10 trials over the course of his life. These trials are not mentioned clearly in Torah, so there are several lists of these trials that all conflict. But Maimonides gives us a list of some pretty difficult moments. Abraham has to leave his homeland. He has to leave behind everything he knows to become a stranger in a strange land. As soon as he arrives, there's a terrible famine. Twice, the reigning king in different places seizes his wife Sarah, wanting her for his own. Abraham miraculously triumphs over impossible odds in battle. He cannot have children with his beloved wife Sarah, so in true biblical form, he also marries Hagar. He is told by God to circumcise himself at an advanced age. He is told by God to send Hagar away after having a child with her. His son Ishmael becomes estranged. And finally, the part we read today, he's instructed by God to sacrifice his son Isaac upon an altar. You are not broken, but you are being tested. We are not alone in dealing with frightening and painful moments in life. Abraham was tested beyond what he felt he could handle, and often so are we. Too often we focus on why we are being tested, why the world presents to us such horrors. Let me suggest that we are asking the wrong question. If we know that everyone goes through terrible things, literally from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our story, think about it. The very first people, Adam and Eve, they had to contend with one of their sons literally killing the other. And Noah had to witness the entire world as he knew it wiped out. And Abraham, who was supposed to be the one chosen to be the father of the Jewish people, had to experience all we've just discussed. If we know that, then perhaps we are meant to understand that fear and pain are part of the fabric of this universe. The world is built that way. We read the stories of our ancestors to normalize the fact that life is complex and hard. Maybe the normal parts of life are the scary ones, the ones where we feel out of balance and face adversity. And the moments that show us beauty and ease are the gems scattered throughout, the gifts that pull us out of the suffering of life. In all of our sacred texts, from the Bible to Shakespeare to Greek stories of heroes to Don Quixote to John Steinbeck to Gone with the Wind to Lord of the Rings to every book worthy of reading, real life is made up of adversity, but it is also packed with moments of beauty, and ordinary people can not only perceive that beauty, but we can do extraordinary things. Triumph above adversity is the story of every sports team imaginable, even the fake ones on Friday Night Lights or Ted Lasso. And it is the narrative of every great movie. It's the stuff all of our lives are made of, and we ingest these stories to remind ourselves who we are. A Hasidic tale tells of a Rabbi in a Russian village who used to take a dip in the river every morning. One day, the new local policeman on his first patrol, just before sunrise, saw the Rebbe diving into the frozen river. He ran to the strange old man, calling him to get out of the river and shouting, "Who are you? Where do you come from? Where are you going?" The old Rebbe smiled gently and asked the policeman, "How much do they pay you for this job?" 10 kafekas a day, answered the baffled young policeman. "I'll tell you what," said the Rebbe. "I'll pay you 20 kafekas a day if you'll come to me every morning and ask me who I am, where do I come from, and where am I going?" There is a moment before creation, before the formation of anything that is tumultuous. Our tradition describes it in the Torah as tohu vavohu, sometimes translated as unformed and void, sometimes as total chaos. It's the place and the time where everything is mixed up. Nothing is clear. To have things so mixed up and out of order before the very idea of order even exists, that's a time that can be full of pain and fear. And yet, if you listen to those words, tohu vavohu, it's almost as if the undulating sounds present more than just chaos. There is some pattern there, something we don't understand or quite yet feel. There is the very seeking after meaning that is built into those words, somehow leading to something we don't yet know. And the resilience of tolerating tohu vavohu is one of the basic skills we need to develop personally, professionally, and communally. I was moved by an article I read this year by Catherine Boyle, who wrote, "The war on pain has not only robbed us of resilience, it has sold us a mirage that is making us miserable." She speaks of an age-old desire to move forward with medicine, technology, and laws that aim to end pain and suffering. It seems every week there's another article that describes parents these days who seek to remove obstacles and moments that cause pain for their children, either hovering like helicopters or plowing the way in front of their children so the way is neatly paved. While the instinct of reducing pain for humanity is so obviously a good one, there's also a risk. She suggests that comfort is our greatest nemesis, and that by doing hard things, this is the only path we have to human growth. Boyle asks at the end of the article, for what will you choose to suffer? If you do not know how to make meaning out of your suffering, will you ever choose to suffer for a cause? In a deeply moving book called The Choice, Embrace the Possible, Dr. Edith Eva Eger tells the story of her horrific experiences in Auschwitz as a 16-year-old girl and her personal experience of liberation in 1945. The foreword to the book, written by Dr. Philip Zimbardo, explains that she was not broken by the horrors she experienced, but somehow she preserved her spiritual and mental freedom in the darkest place modern history knows. She used these tools to empower others throughout her career and inspired countless people to find their way through pain and trauma. Now, to read this book is definitely to see Dr. Eger's extraordinary personal choices and to feel profound gratitude that she lived to pursue this kind of healing work. But hearing her story somehow also reminds the reader that we all have the capacity to be extraordinary. There are ordinary people everywhere who can learn to be extraordinary, and there's an author who has made it his life's work to find them. In Mexico, just across the wild and deadly Cooper Canyon, there's a tribe called the Tarahumara. They're known for their happiness and serenity, but they are also known to be the greatest runners of all time. Author Christopher McDougall expected to find people who were somehow more naturally gifted or genetically inclined to succeed. But it turned out that other regular people, using the highly guarded secret recipes and training techniques, could also learn to scale treacherous mountains in minutes. A friend and teacher once told me that he has noticed that strong people become stronger through trials, while weak people are made weaker by them. In other words, it's up to all of us to choose. It doesn't matter if our lives so far haven't reached the level of extraordinary, or if we failed to see the beauty in this world and only noticed the crud. Did you know that every 10 years, our skeleton literally remakes itself? True. According to studies of the human body, bones grow in a process called modeling, and once a person reaches adulthood, the skeletal system refreshes itself in a process called remodeling. During remodeling, certain cells in the body break down bone and funnel its materials into the bloodstream, while other cells build healthy bone back up. Each year, this happens to 10% of the human body, which means that literally, who you are physically today is not the same person you were 10 years ago. If that can happen to the body, how much more so to the psyche, to the heart and the mind? We can shed old patterns. We can come to new conclusions. You are literally not the same as you were 10 years ago. Why should your actions and thoughts continue to be the same? Our teacher Moses is one of the greatest teachers of transformation our Jewish tradition knows. Do you remember the story of Moses and the rock? It's one of the most painful moments in Torah. Moses tells God that the people of Israel are complaining again and demanding water. Moses is frustrated and angry that this recalcitrant people has failed to listen yet again and failed to have faith. But God knows they just need water. So he asks Moses to speak to the rock, which will bring forth life-giving sustenance. Instead, Moses takes his staff and he strikes the rock in anger. The water indeed flows, but this incident determines Moses' future. He is not permitted to go into the promised land. In his deep pain, he calls out to God, and God says, "Do not ever speak of this again." Moses could have given in to depression or sorrow, or he could have steamed in deep anger. Instead, he makes a different choice. He spends the remainder of his life teaching the people of Israel how to tell and retell their own story, how to see things differently, and how to carry the most important values forward into their new life. The first mountain Moses climbs enables him to bring down the 10 Commandments. The second mountain Moses climbs enables him to become our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses is the greatest teacher the Jewish people have ever known, because he shows us that our greatest treasures are not to be found on that first mountain, but on the second one. The mountain where we face the fact that we dreamed of things that will not come to be, where we choose to reinvent and transform ourselves, and where we begin to live what Stephen Sotloff calls our second life. My favorite spiritual teacher, the Kotzker Rebbe, said, "People are accustomed to look at the heavens and to wonder what happens there. Instead, it would be better if they would look within themselves to see what happens there." That's a lonely prospect sometimes, but it depends on how you look at it. There was once a billboard in Manhattan on Broadway and 56th, near where I used to live. On it was painted the following: "Alone, it's 26.2 miles. Together, it's a marathon." Alone, we're tempted to see the treachery and evil around us. But together, we can climb that second mountain like Moses. Together, we will celebrate. We will mark milestones. We will mourn loss and grief. We will point out the broken bridges, and we will find new roads. Together, we will point out the ridiculous and the spectacular, and we will laugh with delight at both. Who are we? And what will this year be for us? Will we see the magnificence of the world around us? Will we rise to the extraordinary? I believe in us. I believe in you. No matter what we face, we all contain the deep seeds within to make 5784 a good year. Shana Tova.